Hello, today we're going to distribute and solve, which is going to add a third step to our equations. But before we do this, let's go ahead and review how we solve one-step equation and how we solve a two-step equation. So we're going to start by building our wall. We're going to look and see what's happening with the variable. We're subtracting 8, so we solve by doing the opposite. We're going to add 8. And we have to balance our equation, so we do it on both sides. So there's just one step we have to take in order to solve this. These cancel out, become 0, and we're left with our variable on this side and our answer, our solution, on the other side. So m equals 39. Our next equation will take 2 steps to solve. So we're going to have to mathematically get rid of -5 and mathematically get rid of 4. So we start the process the same way. We're going to build our wall, and we start the order of operations backwards. So we're going to start with the number that's being added and subtracted. That's known as a constant. And I see that we're adding 4, so we're going to do the opposite. We're going to take away 4 from both sides. That is our first solving step. These cancel out, leaving -5y on this side. On the other side, I have 30. Now, we're going to do our second step, and we can see that -5 and y are side by side, and side by side means multiply. So we're going to do the opposite. We're going to divide, and because it's -5, we have to divide by a negative. That's because we want a positive variable, and a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So whatever I do on one side of the equation, I have to do exactly the same thing on the other side. So this is our second solving step. So I have y, but on the other side, I might want to draw a face. Calculator is always great practice to use. I have a positive 30, a -5, so my answer is going to be negative. 30 divided by 5 is 6. So the solution is 6. So please turn to the next page, the back side. So today we're going to distribute and solve. It says as equations become more complex, we need to simplify one or both of the sides of the equation before we can solve it. So we're actually going to use the distributive property like we did if it was just an expression, and then we're going to solve the resulting two-step problem, but that's going to cause us to have 3 steps. So we're going to start, and we're just going to focus on this side of the equation, just this left side. And we're going to recall how we did that. We used what we called rainbows. When I multiply 3 times x, I get 3x. And when I go back to this 3, because it multiplies everything inside, so 3 times this +5, I'm going to get +15. So the result of what we just got done doing is 3x plus 5. That's where we use the distributive property. And I'm going to drop down, that equals 36. This was just kind of hanging out. This side was kind of hanging out, waiting for me to release the parentheses using the distributive property. So now we're going to do our first solving step. And like we did on the front side, I'm going to build my wall because I'm going to start solving. So I'm going to build this wall. And I start with the number that's being added or subtracted. So I see that 15 is being added. So my solving step is going to be take away 15. I'm going to take away 15 on both sides. That's my first solving step. And now what we want to have is the result, what happens after I take away 15. So on this side, these cancel out, leaving 3x. And on the other side, 6 minus 5 is 1, 3 minus 1 is 2, so I have 3x equals 21. That's the result after I complete my first solving step. Now we're going to go on to our second solving step. So we're going to do our second step. If I look at the problem, I have 3x, which is side by side. That means multiply. So we're going to do the opposite. We're going to divide by 3. So I'm going to continue this wall, and I'm going to divide by 3. And because that's our last solving step, these cancel out, leaving x, and 21 divided by 3 is 7. So that's our solution. So it took us the first step, which was to release the parentheses to simplify. Then we had our second step, which is actually our first step of solving. And then we had our third step, which was actually our second step of solving. So the first step is actually simplifying. So now let's look at the equations on the bottom. Let's see if we can follow those steps. So the directions say solve the following equations. First, simplify one side using the distributive property, then show all of the solving steps. So I'm going to go ahead and expand this a little bit. So let's just focus on this first problem. We're going to start by building our wall. And it tells us to simplify one side. So 6 times y, this is what we're doing if you recall. Okay, we're multiplying 6 times y, that's 6y. And then 6 times positive 3. Again, this is 6 times 3, and that's going to be 18. It's positive 18, so I'm going to write that as plus 18. And then we just drop down that 48, which is waiting for us to simplify the left side. So now we're ready for our first solving step. So as I look at the problem, I see this is being multiplied, this is being added. So I always start with addition and subtraction. This is my constant. So instead of adding, I'm going to subtract. I do the opposite of what's given on both sides. So that's our first solving step, but actually our second step overall. So what's left over is 6y, and on the other side, it's 30. Now we need our second solving step, which is actually our third step. I'm going to divide by 6, and I'm dividing by 6 because side by side means multiply, so I do the opposite. And what happens is these two cancel out, leaving y equals 5. So our answer, our solution, is y equals 5. So let's go on to the next equation. For the second equation, I'm going to have to deal with a negative coefficient. I'm going to start my distributive property same as I did the first. We're simplifying the left side. So negative 7 times x would be negative 7x. Negative 7 times positive 2. You can pause and use your calculator if you like. That result would be negative 14. So we're going to choose to write it as minus 14. We've talked before how you could write this as plus a negative 14, but seeing this one operation sign is going to really help us when we do the solving part. So we could write it this way, but when we're solving, so much easier to see one sign instead of two, which makes it confusing to solve. So now on the other side, this 42 has been hanging out waiting for us to simplify the left side. Now we're ready to solve. So we're going to build our wall. I'm going to get rid of any addition or subtraction. So I see minus 14. I'm subtracting 14. So we are going to do the opposite, which is adding 14 on both sides to balance that equation. These cancel out, and what's left over on the left side is negative 7, and 42 plus 14 would equal 56. Now we're going to do our second solving step, but our third step overall. I see that negative 7 and x are side by side, which means multiply. We do the opposite. We divide. And because it's a negative 7, we have to use negative 7 on both sides. We're dividing by negative 7 on both sides. A negative divided by negative is a positive. And so what's left over is positive x. That's what we wanted, positive x. And on this side, I have a positive 56 divided by negative 7, so my answer is going to be negative. And 56 divided by 7 would be 8, so negative 8 is our solution. So now let's look at our very last equation. And you're going to notice that it's written backward. So if you want to, you can go ahead and switch the equation around. I'm going to solve as is in just a minute, but I want to let you know how you can adjust this if you are unhappy or not comfortable solving it as is. Well, you would take this entire side, everything exactly how it's written, and move it here. And you'd take what's on this side and move it here. You have to keep this in order, so we have to keep them 4 parentheses n plus 8, and on this side we write it as 40. So if you are uncomfortable with solving it how you see it, go ahead and switch sides around the equal sign. But I'm going to choose not to do that because I want to show you that you can solve it as it is. So I'm going to start my solving step by building the wall. But this time I have to start on the right side because that's where my variable is. I always start with a variable as that guides me through where I'm going to go. So I am going to multiply 4 times n. I'm using the distributive property to release those parentheses. And 4 times positive 8, which would be positive 32. So there, our parentheses are now dissolved. We've used the distributive property to help us. And this time the 40's been hanging out on the left side waiting for us to simplify. Now we're going to continue on with our solving step. But again, I have to really pay attention to which side the variable's on. I need to start on this side. This is the side with the variable that tells me what I need to do. I always start on doing addition and subtraction first. So I see that this is adding 32, so I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to subtract 32 from both sides. Now on this right side, 40 minus 32 would give me 8. And on the right side, these cancel out and I'm left with 4n. So the very last step, again, I look at the side that has the variable. This tells me what to do. 4 and n are side by side, so I know that I need to divide by the number next to the variable, not the 8. It's what is next to the variable. So I'm going to divide by 4 on both sides to balance my equation. And my left side says I have 2, and the right side says I have n. So 2 equals n. If you solved it by switching sides before you began, you get n equals 2, and that means the same thing. So once again, thanks for watching. Take care.